All right, everybody, welcome to session 4. This is our crash course on church marketing, primarily talking to pastors, trying to help them understand a little bit how marketing works and how it all works together. Excited about today. This is probably the most nerdy of the topics, right?
Yep. But that's okay. And it's cool is we've got some special bonuses that we're going to announce that's going to really be a game changer for you and your church. So stay tuned to the very end of this episode because we're going to do some things that help you really go to the next level in the content marketing and in the SEO marketing.
Yeah, and here's the thing with search. That's what we're talking about today is search. And, you know, I've got a friend named Matt, and Matt shares this story with me all the time. He's like, if you just go to Google and pull up a search bar and type in, you know, whatever city you're in, and then add the word divorce. So like Kansas City divorce or Atlanta divorce or whatever. And then just look at the search results. It's all divorce attorneys. You know, it's like all this bad stuff, right? There's no churches that show up in the list. And why is that? Well, it's because, first of all, those people are spending a lot of money to appear at the top of the results. But it's because they've mastered this and churches haven't.
Yep.
Like our stuff doesn't show up in search, and it should.
Yeah, which is really so sad because you know this. You spent so much time and energy developing content and praying over it and pouring your heart into it, and you wouldn't go to all that work and preach to an empty room, right? You're like, well, I spent all this time. I want people to hear this and apply this. That's why we're in ministries, to see lives transformed, and that's why these two areas are so critical. And it's so sad that because they are a little bit more techie, a lot of pastors are just like, I don't know how to do that. And so that amazing content, that help, that hope sits on the shelf. Yeah. That's really what our community needs. But there's this like canyon that it can't be crossed.
It's hard to find, right? And so here's what's crazy about this is we're not even telling you to make a whole bunch of new stuff. Like you already have the stuff.
Right.
Your sermons are good. They're helpful. Your church has helpful stuff that will help people in your community. What this is about is making it findable.
Right.
Yeah. It's just making it findable. And it's something that can be done.
Right. And if ever you hear the letters SEO, so as a lead pastor, let me just clue you in what we're talking about. Search engine optimization. So now you're talking with somebody you can pretend like, I'm an expert. All that.
That's what all the SEO experts do anyway.
Yeah.
Like, I'm an expert.
And that's it really, if you just listen to what that's saying, search. So that's Google, that's Bing, that's YouTube, search engine. So and then optimization. So essentially optimizing your content or your website, anything like in your digital location, so that it ranks high on the top of those search engines. And that feeds into our aha moment that 90% of people Googling or searching for something in your city are not going past the first page of those search results. So if your church is not showing up when you want to be found on the first page, it's like you don't exist. So let that sink in as a lead pastor. All that content that you're pouring your heart into, the church that you planted, the amount of hours that you're praying, and all of that, if you're not showing up on the first page, is like you don't exist to your community. So that's why this area is so crucial. You got to find a way to get all that help and that hope showing up on search engines.
Yeah, so again, you already have a lot of this stuff. And so one of the things I would love to see churches do more of is take this stuff that they're already having and just make it a little more findable.
Yep.
And so how do we do that? Well, we title it using titles that, people are searching for. So imagine, like, take your sermon from last Sunday. Are people going into Google searching for the title of your sermon?
Not the specific title.
Probably not, but could you change the title of your sermon in just a little way and then post it somewhere on your website that next week, and just that would make a difference.
And you might even consider adding a few local regional city names. Like you might start small if you're like in a big metro area, like some specific neighborhoods that you're in. Don't start like at one church we work with is in like the Bronx or New York City. Like we're going to start Pelham Gardens, really small. What's the neighborhood called that we're in? Then we're going to add a few keywords. So just simply putting in, we used to, when we started Summit Park Church, our goal was to be at the top of page 1 for churches in Lee Summit the day that we launched. And that meeting in a community center, that was really hard. But looking at the stats since then, the first 5 years, we had over 100,000 organic search visitors to our website because of all that hard work. But one of the things we used to do is we used to blog articles on the sermon series that we were doing. And then at the end of every single one of those articles, we would have a heading that was like, looking for a church in Lee Summit, ? We'd love to invite you to Summit Park Church. And I'll think every sermon series that we're doing, there's some a local search specific content now that's hitting our website with, we're talking about relationships, we're talking about parenting, we're talking about hope for our community, and now that's tying in with keywords like Lee Summit, Kansas City, and then over time, man, you just start to see in it. Let me just say this too. This, what we're talking about, isn't you go do this week and then 5 families show up. This is long term, but
snowball.
It is powerful. You're talking about the potential to reach thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people based on how large your area is.
And it's something you can do. So I would say 2 things. First of all, it's something you're already creating content. What would it look like to have a volunteer take your sermon from Sunday or your series from the whole last month and just kind of almost reform? They don't have to write it. Just reformat it. Put headings, put titles, and then just post it to your church website.
Yeah.
And that optimizing, using words that people search for, that would make a big difference. The other thing you could do, same volunteers, what would it look like to make some articles on the things that people are searching for?
Yep.
Where help for parents, struggling with looking for divorce, alternatives to divorce in whatever your city is. You start writing and producing that kind of stuff, it will start showing up.
Yeah, and I love how you mentioned even getting a team together.
Yeah.
This would be a perfect opportunity almost to have a little group of volunteers that almost operate like a newspaper inside your church, where like even if you had 4 volunteer writers and their job is to write 1 or 2 articles a quarter, and then you say, hey, do you want to write an article where you recap our sermon series and put it in such a way that our community can both find it and understand it? What about just going in and sending a volunteer writer into your kids ministry and they do a write-up about all the cool things that's happening in your kids ministry or your Living Free program, or you just think about all the things that the church is doing. Now you take this little group of volunteers and now they're writing content that bridges that gap to your community. Optimize it for search engines, and man, you are talking about the potential now for your community to find all this great stuff.
And I know there's a lot of technical stuff you can do, and I know that you can get some people in to help with the technical stuff. And when we talk about search, it's like keywords and H1 tags and all this stuff. It sounds complicated, but there's a human level of this that you can do as a pastor. What are people searching for, and just produce content on that topic.
Yeah.
Like literally, if you just boil it down to that, think like a human being typing out on Google, what are they searching for? You answer those questions in just normal words, normal language, and just begin putting that stuff online. That snowball will start working.
Yeah, and one of the things that you talked about in the content episode is also really determining when you want to be found. Yeah. And this can go back to, what is your core calling from God as a church? Is it to reach young families? Like if that is, like that's where the really powerful of this is when those intersect. The content you're writing intersects with the core calling of your church. Like, for example, if you're like, hey, we are all in on helping young families in our community, like we absolutely love that. So what can you write about your church, your programming, your ministries that intersects with young families searching? So one thing that we talk about in CMU is, would it make sense to write an article about, hey, where are places that kids eat free in Lee Summit?
Love that.
Great content. Your team, remember that team of volunteers can go research all that, put that together.
You get to eat at all those right places.
Yeah, get to eat all. And guess what? One of the places is Sunday morning. Summit Park Church has free donuts and coffee. Like kids can eat free. They absolutely love it. Show a picture of kids loving it. Plus, the parents get some time away. So now, like you will have potentially tens of thousands of people finding that article, and it's a creative way that you're inviting them on Sundays to come eat free and get free coffee at your church. So think outside the box a little bit, but where those intersects, like that's
church
huge.
and the community, all that. And it's like people in your community, they're asking spiritual questions. So they're going into Google and they're typing in questions of faith.
Yep.
And our churches aren't showing up. I mean, they're getting a bunch of like wrong answers, So when we create, and you already do so much of this in your sermons, but when you make it findable, when you make it digestible, when you put good titles, don't title the thing Ephesians 2. I mean, no one's searching for that. That's not what they're searching for. But the stuff in your sermon that you talked about, when you call it out, make it searchable, put good titles on there, and just post it, people will find it, even spiritual stuff.
Yeah, and you and I were talking about this. It's a little bit telling that on all our church websites, we have our theological positions that are explaining to already Christian believers, like what type of church we are. That's okay, but what would be way better is those, hey, tell me, who is Jesus?
Who is Jesus?
Why should I care? What is salvation? What would that look like if I committed to becoming a follower of Jesus? faith frequently asked questions. That's the type of stuff your community actually cares about.
And you know about it.
Right. And you have great content about, right? You can write a little bit, show a 90-second video portion of your service where you gave an altar call, right? And that's valuable, helpful content that's probably more helpful than you trying to explain your position on the Trinity and 16 fundamentals that you're we got to start thinking more like missionaries. My pastor friend Joel Triska talks about that all the time. Think more like missionaries, and where's too much theological positions is kind of a past missionaries, just reaching people what their questions are actually asking.
Well, those deep theological questions are not the questions people are searching for on Google and going to find your church. Those are questions that Christians from other churches are going to go and try to nitpick. So, but being helpful, sharing these kind of things, and just being consistent over time, it really helps. So smart.
You guys are on.
But content marketing and then search marketing, these two, they kind of work well together. So hopefully you've seen that these two are kind of related. And then as you do them, as you start messing around with some of these things, they help the word of mouth. They help the social. They help that, all kind of works together. That's why we're talking about 7 different kinds of church marketing in this course.
Yep. And in the next episode, we're going to talk about internal marketing. So what we told you not to do, like on social media, we're now going to kind of reveal where that stuff goes. And so that's the next episode. We'll see you guys over there.